Hi guys, welcome back to the Social Tune, and today we're back with another episode of Record Roundup. And this episode is going to be a real treat, because we had several albums released over the past couple of weeks that are absolutely excellent, with several of them having shots at making my best albums of the year. And so, let's not waste any more time, let's dive in.
Knowing that this can't go on forever, likely one of us will have to spend some days alone.
So to start off, we're taking a look at the latest album by Jason Isbell and the 400 unit, The Nashville Sound. And honestly, I was really tempted to do a full review for this one, especially after reading Pitchfork's review of it, calling it stale and one note, and yeah, I almost lost it. This is one of my favorite artists working today. I'm not going to allow anyone, least of all myself, to just gloss over it. Because while I'm not quite sure that it's better than his last album or Southeastern, the fact that I'm comparing it to those albums at all should let you know just how incredible this is. This is easily Jason Isbell's most direct and visceral project to date, which is clearly reflected in the instrumentation courtesy of the 400 unit. They bring country rock swagger to Cumberland Gap and a vicious twang to Molotov and White Man's World. But they can also be more subtle on both the opening and the closing acoustic tracks, as well as the album highlight If We Were Vampires, the song where he acknowledges that either he or his wife will die first at some point, leaving the other on their own. And yet it says something that the lesson that he takes from that is they should just treasure and appreciate their time together all the more because of it. After all, if everything lasted forever, we wouldn't value anything. And that wisdom and maturity starts right at the beginning of this album. Jason Isbell opens up this album with Last of My Kind, a song that cuts extremely deep and is easily one of his most quintessential tracks to date, mainly because it just sums him up so well. Because while he may look and sound like a southern hick, he's also populist and very intelligent. And with that dichotomy, in the end, he feels like he's disappointing everyone. And that really does shine through on every single song here. His sincere sorrow for both the underprivileged on White Man's World, as well as the men who are just working hard to make a living in coal mining towns, forced into compromising and making decisions they otherwise wouldn't on Cumberland Gap. And the fact that he shows empathy for both sides is a huge selling point on this album. Hope the High Road, prime example, as it sketches out just how messed up the world is for everyone at the moment. We're all scared for our own reasons, and the only way to bring things back to a balance is by respecting those around us, not just ourselves, taking that high road. And the other thing to stress is that Jason Isbell isn't making this music in order to be popular or relevant, but because he feels like it's his responsibility. After all, on Anxiety, he finds himself constantly worrying, especially now that he has a young daughter to worry about, who also drove him to write White Man's World, as well as the closing track, Something to Love, where he encourages her to fight for something that she really cares about, as that will make her all the stronger. To sum up, the driving factors of this album are that the world is unjust to everyone, and we all have a responsibility to fight that injustice, and that our relationships do take sacrifice, as it's portrayed as a waste on Chaos and Clothes, purely selfish on Tupelo, and a sacrifice of your own principles on Molotov. And while I could nitpick this project, a number of the guitar tones feel a little off, and I wouldn't quite say it has the incredible highs of his last couple of records. It really did strike me. I adore it. And so, it's a strong 9 out of 10, another huge win for Jason Isbell. There's a reason that this guy is one of my favorite artists working today, so once again, check him out. You won't regret it.
Don't take it personally, I'm surprised you call me after the things I said. Skirt, all niggas.
Oh boy. This should be fun. I'll be blunt, SZA has never impressed me. While many people would prefer to see Top Dog Entertainment as a bed of nothing but quality, I'm more than willing to admit that they do have a couple of weak spots. Schoolboy Q is great on his features, but doesn't really deliver on his solo projects. Kendrick Lamar has the exact opposite problem. Both Ab-Soul and Isaiah Rashad show a lot of potential, but often let themselves and drug abuse get in the way of making real progress. J-Rock is a huge talent, but you barely ever hear anything from him. He isn't consistent. And of course, you have SZA, who released her debut album Z back in 2014, which frankly is a fitting title because that album is a snore. I'm sorry, it just did nothing for me, and on pretty much all of her subsequent features, SZA was just okay to me. Now granted, she's never been bad, but if you compare her best performances to her contemporaries on a normal day, I'm not all that impressed. Of course, it doesn't help that I've never been a big fan of R&B as a genre. It can generally just feel too inconsequential to me, which is why when an album like Lemonade or Sold Out drops, I notice. And according to many, that's what I was going to get with this album. The writing was stronger, the hooks were better, the instrumentation was more diverse. And that's all true, but I'm still not a huge fan of this. It's definitely good, better than her last album, but that doesn't mean that my problems with SZA as a performer have gone away. Even though I will say, she's clearly trying harder than ever. And I really do appreciate the effort that she puts into her performance here, especially on songs like Go Gina, 20-something, and Supermodel. She really does try to emote, but the key word there is try. The simple fact of the matter is, she's not all that expressive as a singer, or at the very least, she always expresses the same emotion no matter what she tries. And while her singing itself is good on this album, it switches things up so little that I could barely tell a lot of these songs apart. Which is not helped by the production, which just like everything else here, is pretty good, but isn't really noteworthy. It never switches things up enough. You get lost in the haze of this project way too easily. And as far as the content goes, well, I will say that it does redeem the project a little. Because yeah, while at its core it's basically just an album about relationships, there's more nuance here than you might expect. For one, SZA always seems to be putting herself down and doubting herself in these relationships, and seems genuinely surprised when any of these guys come back to her, but she also recognizes that she's flawed, making those mistakes and acknowledging them, then taking ownership of them, owning them as part of herself. And yet despite that, yeah, I can't say that I'm going to be piling on my praises for this album in the same way so many other critics have. It's a nice listen, but not really one that I ever see myself wanting to have again. And so, it's a solid 6 out of 10, which is bound to go down great with you guys, right? I don't know, maybe I just wasn't in the right frame of mind for this album. I was really annoyed about something else when I was listening to it for the first time. But if you want an album that was perfect for that frame of mind at the time,
I feel like Matthew McConaughey. I don't care for what they gotta say. Tony Perkins, how I dropped away. Jason Bourne with the headshot. Jason Statham with the whip game. Liam Neeson with the rescue. I go gunner with the leather face.
This is by far my most highly requested album to date. Seriously, more than Paramore, more than Kendrick Lamar, so many people have been asking me to cover this. And the reason why is probably for the overwhelming amounts of praise that it's gotten from many outlets, including several independent ones like Big Wind and The Needle Drop. My personal favorite description of this album that I've heard so far is the most bangerific album of the year. And while that's a great way to describe anything, it honestly only sums up about half of this album. This self-proclaimed boy band have delivered one of the most experimental and diverse albums that I've heard all year, and strays right up to the edge of hip-hop with touches of pop, R&B, punk, rock, and really no missteps. And as you can imagine, this many elements coming together results in some fantastic hooks. The instrumentation sounds fantastic, ranging from the cavernous thumping beat, the stalking bass line, and the industrial breakdown on the phenomenal opener Heat, to the catchy as hell laid back elastic flow on Gold, the playful beat and tempo on Face with a fantastic chorus from Joba, the almost hypnotic looping guitars on Fake, and the fantastic guitar-driven closer Waste, which would have fit quite comfortably on a Frank Ocean project. Now, there are certain moments that don't really feel entirely unique, specifically Gold, which contains definite influences from both TDE and Dreamville, as does Cash to a certain extent. Also, while Star is mostly very funny with all of its pop culture references, there are a couple that don't land all that well. It was much better on Boys, which has better references and uses them a little more sparingly. But those are minor nitpicks, along with the main theme of this album, which may feel a little flimsy on paper, but which they actually do deliver on very well, which is clearly shown on the tastefully auto-tuned low-key ballad Trip, which is about how young people struggle to be themselves. Or you have the multiple bad relationships sketched out on Swim, the suspicion and the strain that that puts on the relationship on Face, and especially the story of coming into adulthood on Milk, settling for the person that you've grown to become with a fantastic inspirational outro. Although, it's kind of funny, my favorite song on this album is one that kind of stands out on its own. Cash, the most political song on this album with easily the best hook, about how the rich and the poor both suffer in their own ways. Both groups dream, both get scared, both are entirely human, and neither is inherently evil. And yet, we all have that mentality of me against the world. Basically, this album really caught me off guard. I don't think I adore it quite as much as some other critics seem to, but it's still a damn impressive, striking album that I will definitely be returning to. In other words, strong 8 out of 10, definitely check this out if you haven't already. There, now all of you can finally get off my back about this. I've always felt kind of bad for Lorde. Oh, not because she started out as a famous pop star far too young or any crap like that. No, in fact, for her age, she's incredibly mature and I fully support her career. But more because she's always fallen a little bit short for me. Unlike most people, I was never really all that enamored by Pure Heroine or any of its singles. Oh, I really liked them and respected them, but I always felt that Lorde was on the cusp of truly impressing me, and that never really happened. But that all changed when I heard the Jack Antonoff produced lead-off single, Green Light, which had a ton of nervous energy and a pop sensibility that many had a problem with, but which I personally loved. It's a great pop song. And so, I was pretty hyped for the release of her new album, Melodrama. And you know, so far in 2017, I've really been missing some really great pop music, and I'm pleased to announce that here, Lorde filled in that need in me effortlessly. This is everything I wanted from Lorde. Stronger hooks, better writing, and of course, maintaining her clever and likable personality. This just isn't the kind of album that you expect on the charts nowadays. I mean, sure, it does have some mainstream pop-influenced cuts, like Greenlight, Supercut, Homemade Dynamite, and the chorus on the Louvre, but even each of those songs had something more to them. Homemade Dynamite and Supercut have a fantastic nervous energy to them, along with some really insightful lyrics about the bliss one can find in a relationship, with the former and the Louvre being set in the beginning of that relationship, right in the throes of passion, and the latter being set after the relationship has ended, and looking back on it, only seeing the highlights, idealizing it more than it actually was. Plus, the melody on Supercut is partly interpolated from the one on Greenlight, not to mention just being a fantastic 80s throwback. But if we want to talk about the real highlights, we need to take a look at Sober, which alternates between a muted, restrained beat that builds up a ton of atmosphere before bursting out with its triumphant horns on the chorus. Then you have the absolutely incredible vocal performance on the piano ballad Writer in the Dark, a song that any music or songwriting nerd will go absolutely nuts for, especially on the fantastic multi-tracked chorus, where she sounds years older than her actual age. It's actually kind of haunting. Again, Lorde is incredibly mature for her age, and on this album more than ever that is abundantly clear in her voice. But the easy album highlight, and the one that had me most hyped for this project, was by far Liability. I have never heard Lorde sound so raw, broken, and lonely as she sings with a hoarse, hushed delivery over a simple piano line with faint squeals of a guitar resonating in the background. It's by far the most heartbreaking and powerful piano ballad that I've heard since Beyoncé's Sandcastles. That's the kind of quality we're talking about here, people. It's a song where she talks about how her extreme personality can often drive away those around her, putting a strain on both her friendships and her relationships. And as a bit of an extreme person myself, who has sometimes been described as too much or too intense, this song is incredibly relatable to me. I fucking adore it. Now I will say, the album's not perfect. As much as I personally love the instrumental parallels, I can kind of see why some people have called it lazy recycling. And while I thought that Hard Feelings was gorgeous, the bridge that led into Loveless really didn't sound good, and I didn't really care for Loveless either. It's overall the worst song on this album. But that aside, this album is still phenomenal. It centers around a relationship that broke her, and she handles it incredibly maturely, both embracing pop stereotypes and subverting them, revealing just how melodramatic they really are. Any good parody of pop culture needs to understand and to an extent respect what it's satirizing, and here Lorde delivers in spades. And so it gives me great pleasure to say this, Lorde. This album is excellent, netting an extremely strong 8 out of 10. I have been waiting for one of her projects to really blow me away, and this one was even better than I dare to hope for. Excellent work. And that's it for this week's Record Roundup. A pretty damn great week overall. But hey, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you thought of these albums down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and if there are any other albums that you'd like me to review, please post them in the comments or tweet them at me at @thesocialtune, link in the description. Please subscribe so you don't miss a thing, and until the next time, I'm Finn, and this is The Social Tune, signing off.